referring to today is just after what we did yesterday with viewports, moving into the next page here with 20 dimensioning rules. And I guess I'll address more or less like what dimensioning is and what it's for and whatever. So you've gotten to this point in your assignment. And I guess the purpose of this video is going to be to explain how to dimension and talk about ANSI standard. You've gotten this far in your assignments, so you've actually you've drawn all your shapes, you've laid them out on the page here with the viewport. You've made sure your viewport layer is off, your title block's all filled out, not like half filled out like mine, and everything's spaced really nicely. And now we're ready to assign dimensions. So a dimension it's like a measurement value, and it just shows you the size of something so that you can pass these drawings on to someone else and they can recreate this part. So this is where you want to share vital information, and that could be something like, what is this part made of? Like, is it made of like aircraft grade aluminum, or is it made of cheese, or like what are we looking at here? What's it made of? What are the dimensions? Are there any special instructions? Like, all of that would go here. Now, the standard that we're adhering to, there's different standards, but we're adhering to ANSI standard, and ANSI standard is, did I close it? No, here it is. ANSI standard is the American National Standards Institute. Now there's also ISO, which is the International Standards Organization. Now, you would think that we would go with the International Standards Organization, but frankly, for the purposes of high school, ANSI is just a little bit simpler. So I think once you kind of understand standards, and then you get a job in the real world when you leave here, they'll tell you what standards they want you to follow, and it'll be pretty quick to pick it up. I just find that ISO is it's more involved, and it's like a lot more that you have to learn at first. So rather than doing that, we're gonna go with the ANSI standards, and I do like a modified version of ANSI standard, because otherwise, like, you could spend the whole semester, like you could take a course just on learning ANSI standard. So we're not going to go that in depth. In fact, I've just kind of summed it up into 20 rules that I want you to think about when you're dimensioning, as opposed to like reading the ANSI standard novel and trying to like figure out what it is that you have to do. So as far as like what are standards are rules more or less with like where you place your dimensions and how you present the information that you have to share. And there's a particular way that you should share it that makes it like easiest to read, universally understood, and most eloquent, meaning like it's not messy. And you generally with dimensioning, you try not to overshare. So you try not to repeat dimensions where it's not necessary. If you want to give enough information so that there aren't like a ton of calculations necessary, but you don't want to give so much that you're making the person who has to make this feel stupid, where you've like over dimensioned it. They're like, okay, yeah, like you already told me that, I could have figured that out. So for example, if you put the length measurement on one view, you're not going to put it on the other view. Like, they get it. The item is 12 inches long. You don't have to tell them twice. So that kind of thing. So I guess I'll kind of go through how we're going to get started with this. So in your layers, you're going to want to make sure you're in your dimension layer. I think we abbreviated it to DIM. It's like the cyan colored layer. And then you're going to want to make sure that you're using the dimension tool. So again, that's you can go under the annotate tab and then go to dimension, or you can just go from the home tab and press the dimension tool. Now you can pick this like auto dimension tool, or you can actually specifically pick what you want to do. If you want to do a linear dimension, aligned, if you want to do an angle, a radius, a diameter, whatever. I'm just going to start with linear because this thing is rectangular and there's nothing fancy. So I'm just going to start with linear dimension. So back to kind of like what we're doing. I'll go through this 20 rules with you. I don't know that I'm going to read through all of them. We'll see. But I just want you to get that there is a standard. We have to adhere to the standard for a reason so that people can understand what they're looking at. You can hand it to anyone. They should be able to make this. Okay, so unfortunately, dimensioning rules are violated frequently. These errors have appeared so often for so long. Often they're accepted without question by many drawing makers and users. However, violations are dangerous and expensive because they introduce ambiguity and multiple interpretations and guesswork into the manufacturing process. So before a company can eliminate errors, it has to be able to recognize them. So again, like, there are people in the workforce who don't follow standard and they just kind of dimension however they want. However, that leads to ambiguity. And what happens is when you send plans out somewhere to be manufactured by someone, if they're not giving like clear, concise information, you can get multiple interpretations. So you'll send this somewhere to get made and it'll come back not as the thing that you needed it to be, or the tolerances are incorrect, or like the part just doesn't fit because you didn't dimension it in a way that they understood. So it's important that we adhere to a standard so that we don't have any kind of like misinterpretation when we send this off somewhere to get made. Also, this is how you like develop feuds and things where like you send something, they send it back and it's quote wrong. And then you're like, what is wrong with you? Why can't, and then they're like, why can't you just dimension it properly? And now you have like a business that you can't work with any longer. So like it's important to adhere to that level of professionalism and make sure that you are dimensioning to standard and you're not pointing fingers and blaming other people. So first and foremost, each dimension has to be given clearly, so it can only be interpreted in one way. So you don't want to have any ambiguity in your dimensions. Your dimension figures should never be crowded or in any way made difficult to read. And you don't want to duplicate the same information in two different ways. So the example of that would be if I put the overall length here, and then I was to like do it again down here. Like I've presented the exact same information. Now you may be looking at that and then be like, well, this is 12, but how do we know that that is 12? Well, I'll tell you how, because it's the same freaking thing. It's the same part. You're just looking at the front and you're looking at the top. It's the same measurement, right? It's the same as like if I were to stand up, I am the same height if you're looking at me from the front as I am if you're looking at me from the side. Like I haven't shape shifted. So same thing here. Your part's not going to shape shift. You don't have to tell them twice. They're going to think this is like an insult on their intelligence that they couldn't figure that out. So we don't want to duplicate information. Dimensioning to hidden lines should be avoided wherever possible. It's not always avoidable. So I don't want to say don't ever dimension to hidden lines, but if you have an opportunity to avoid that, please do so. I'll go into that in like a little bit more depth after. Dimensions between two adjacent, dimensions applying to two adjacent views should be placed between the views unless clarity is promoted by placing it outside. So what I mean by that is, if I had a choice of putting the 12 here between the object and the border, or I had a choice of putting it here between the two adjacent views, I should choose here. So I'm going to get rid of this one. So if I have the opportunity to put it between the two views or between these two views, this is kind of like your primary dimensioning space. Now, if you haven't left enough space, like you put your views too close together, simple, move them. Like, it's not that hard. So just move them down so you have like a little bit more room. Like if you know that you're primarily going to be dimensioning between the two views, well, like just make more room. No big deal. So there we go. Like presto changeo, now we have more room. We have lots of room to add dimensions. Longer dimensions should be placed outside all intermediate dimensions so that dimension lines will not cross. So what I mean by that is it's like your school picture where you put the tall kids in the back and the short kids in the front so they're not crossing, like so. So I would do something like this. Oh, I can't go back into my dimension because I closed it. Here we go. I would put the tall one there and I would put the short one here rather than doing this. Right, this messy, not following rules. This clean, tidy, looks so nice. Ooh, ah. Oh, there's a leg. There we go, no more leg. So dimension inside, tall dimension outside, and then you kind of move on from there. In a machine drawing, all units marked should be omitted, except when they're necessary for clarity, like using a 1-inch valve or 1 millimeter drill or whatever. So here, as you can see in my dimensions, it just says 12. Well, 12 what? Like elephants, 12 inches, 12 feet, 12 miles. Like what are we looking at? So here, the units are omitted, and again, that's to save space and to make it look cleaner. Instead of just saying inches after every single one, it gets redundant. What we're going to do is we're going to add notes up here. So I'm going to go in my text command and I'm going to hover over this view and hover over this view so I can get kind of like what would be a fourth view up here. And I'm going to type in all capitals. Now this is important. The formatting is important, and I will dock you marks. Okay, not because I'm mean and evil. I mean, I might be, but this isn't why. So it's because it's to standard. So I'm going to use all shouty capitals, notes, no colon, no underline, no punctuation, okay? Like throw English out the window. So notes, enter, and then not in shouty capitals any longer. We got all, what do we want? All dimensions in what units is this assignment? What are we working in? Imperial, but specifically what? Miles, inches, in inches. So this is where the mistakes are made. Sometimes people hand this in and say imperial. Okay, thanks. Imperial what? Right? Or when people say metric, it's in metric. Metric what? Okay, so you have to say specifically the unit. So all dimensions are in inches. If you really want to punctuate, you can put it here. I don't really care if you use punctuation at all, but all dimensions in inches. This is perfect. Don't change it. Okay, as far as what size should your font be, good question. I would say no bigger than the font, like the largest font in your title block. So your largest font here, this is about the same size. Okay, cool. Like we just don't want it to be like angry shouting at us from the corner of the page. We want it to be a note. We don't want it to take over. So here we have notes, all dimensions in inches. Awesome. So now we don't have to put inches, 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 inches repetitively through the entire assignment. Now it says except for if you have to clarify. So if there was a hole and you had to use like a, I don't know, 15/16 inch drill bit or something, you may want to write specifically a 15/16 inch drill bit or like a 10mm drill bit or whatever, because sometimes in an imperial project, you might use a metric tool and vice versa. So if you have to specify the units of one thing, that's fine. You just don't want to like blast us with the units on every single dimension because it becomes redundant. Dimension should be only attached to one view, no extension lines connecting two views. So what I mean by that is this. You're not dimensioning this view and then pulling it all the way up here. That's stupid. In fact, that looks stupid, but you get the idea. Like you're dimensioning this, so it should be here. You don't want to pull it all the way up there. That's again like a bit of an exaggeration, but you get what I mean. Dimensions should line up in a chain fashion. So what I mean by that is, and this moved somehow. Let's do that again. So what I mean by they have to line up, it'll be like this. So I've told you this overall is 12. So I'm going to add a 2 here, and then I'm going to add this dimension here. And they line up, right? This one and this one are in line. The 6 isn't like way up here and the 2 is not down there. They line up. It looks nice. And I haven't dimensioned, oh, go away. Sorry, this is like annoying. There we go. I haven't dimensioned this. Okay, now why? Why haven't I done that? Because of the next one, number 11. A complete chain of detailed dimensions should be avoided. It's better to omit one. Right, so this is again where you're questioning someone's intelligence if they can't figure this out. So you've told me that the overall is 12. You've told me this is 2, and you've told me this is 6. Pretty sure they can figure this out all by themselves. Like they're capable of doing basic subtraction to figure this dimension. Also, it's less crowded. So if I was to provide that extra dimension here, right, it just, oops, not angled. But if I was to provide that extra dimension, it just starts to look cluttered. And frankly, it's just too much information. In fact, that's what I'm going to write on your assignment. TMI, too much information. Like, we don't need this. We get it. Like, 8 + 2 + 4 is 12. Good job. You can do math. Okay. So we'll get rid of this one because, again, the person who's making this can do basic addition and subtraction. This is the only case where you're omitting a dimension. Just this one circumstance where you have an overall dimension, you always need the overall one. And then you have a chain of dimensions, you omit one. That's it, not 2, not on either side. You don't omit like whole dimensions, like just this. And again, it looks neater and you're not insulting someone's ability to do basic subtraction. A dimension line should never be drawn through a dimension figure or inside or whatever. And then a figure should never be lettered over any line of the drawing. So if I took the 2 and I put it inside, so we don't want a dimension inside, we don't want to pull through, where avoidable, right? So like a couple kids in the class are doing another assignment that's a little bit more complicated, and sometimes it's unavoidable. Like sometimes you have to pull the dimension through because there's no other way to do it. Another way, if you want to avoid dimensioning inside and it's something important, is you could put it in your notes. Like let's say there's a hole that goes right through the middle and you want to tell me the diameter of that hole, then you could just put it in your notes. Be like hole diameter, blah, 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 depth, blah, 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 and tell me up here. A little bit more eloquent than like plastering numbers inside of the object. What else do we got here? Dimensions should be spaced uniformly throughout the drawing. This isn't absolutely necessary. It suggests having them about 10 millimeters above the object line and 6 millimeters apart. Not necessary. I'm not going to hold you to this standard, and I'm not going to go through and measure because it's going to take me hours. So just making sure that your dimensioning is more or less uniform. Like it's not like those two and then this one's like way up here. Again, looks dumb versus looks nice and evenly spaced. Just eyeball it. Looks good to me. No lines of your drawing should be used as a dimension line or coincide with a dimension line. So this is kind of hard to explain with this assignment, but you don't want to use like part of the object as part of your dimension. It's really hard to do that, and you have to actually modify the dimension and delete one leg of it. So I'm not even going to show you that because you don't need to know how to modify and delete dimensions. Dimension lines should not cross if avoidable. We talked about that. So like this kind of thing should be avoided if possible. Tuck this in here and it looks much nicer as well. Leaders. So if for some reason you need to use a leader, they look like this. They come off here and you type words and stuff and then you get a leader. For some reason you need to use a leader. They need to come off at these. So leader should be about 40 degrees, 30 degrees, 60 degrees. Again, this is just like an eyeball. But what you want to avoid is you don't want your leader at 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 270. Like you don't want it to be anywhere in a cross configuration. You want it to be like pretty much any other angle. I won't dock you if you need to use a leader. Now, leader is a way to point into something specific and let me know important information. You probably won't be using leaders for dimensioning for a little while because these drawings are like fairly simple, but that's more or less how you do that. Dimension figures should be about 3 millimeters high for whole numbers and 6 millimeters high for fractions. We've already changed our text height and all of that in our dim style. Been there, done that. We don't have to worry about that. In general, a circle is dimensioned by a diameter and an arc by radius. You don't have any circles or arcs, but if you want to dimension them, it would be under annotate and then here, and then you would go to radius or diameter. Now, once you get a little bit further, I will be like, if you dimension an arc with diameter and vice versa, again, that's where I'll be like docking marks. So it's important to know these, but at the same time, you don't have any arcs or radiuses. These are just little blocks for this assignment. And then lastly, notes should be brief and clear, and the wording should be in standard form. What is standard form? Like this: notes, no colon, no period, no underline, no fancy calligraphy, all dimensions in inches. If you want to do all that in shouty capitals too, sure, go ahead. I just found it a little bit shouty, so I didn't continue with the shouty capitals. All dimensions in inches, done. You can put a period if you really, punctuation's your jam, but other than that, like, you keep it pretty simple. So for this assignment, I'm going to go through kind of start to finish how you would dimension this now that we've gone through the rules. So first thing I would look at when I get to my assignment, wait, what? Go away. There. First thing I would look at is, are my views spaced out enough so that I can put in my dimensions, and are they all in line? Oh, someone's mad. Yeah, they're good. They're all in line. We have enough spacing. I have my notes. I'm good to go. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to dimension envelope size. Does anybody know what that is? Have you ever heard the term envelope size? Envelope size is exactly as it sounds. So if you were going to take this item and put it in the envelope, how big does the envelope have to be? So what I mean by that is, what are the overall dimensions of this object in case I had to put it in a box or something? So in doing so, you're going to dimension your overall length, your overall width, and your overall height. I'm going to do that by putting my length here, my height here, and then I'll put overall width of the object. I was going to put it here, but this dimensions, it pulls way off to the side. You could do it like that. You could also do it like this and have your overall here. It's really up to you. I'm going to keep my dimensions here, and then maybe I can do other dimensions up there, whatever. So I've got overall length, overall width, overall height. Okay, spoiler alert, these are the first 3 things I look for in every single one of your assignments. So my recommendation to you, these should be the first 3 things that you dimension on every single one of your dimension or assignments: length, width, height. And then moving on from there, we can just fill in the missing information. So like, we've got this dimension here, we've got this dimension here, and you can, I don't know that you have to pull it all the way down here. That's a little extreme. We can probably put it here. And then I'm going to omit this 3rd dimension because I gave the overall as 12. Now, there's another way to do this, right? We could, oh, wait, what? Escape. What's happened? You could put the 2 here, you could put the 6 here, like I did originally. There's lots of different ways to do dimensions that are correct. There's also different ways to do dimensions that are incorrect. I'll show you a few ways here that are correct. Like we want to focus on that. So the 2 and the 6 here, that's fine. You could also put the 2 and the 6 here, that's fine. You could also put a 2 and then dimension this and leave the middle blank. It doesn't really matter, right? Like the world is your oyster. You determine how you want to do this. But I am still missing dimensions. So more information that I have to add. I have to add some information here. So we know this is 6, but we need this dimension or we need this dimension. I'm going to go with the little one. Now, what you may find is when you do a small dimension, the 2 might pop out of the arrows and it might like pull to the side, maybe like this. Okay, if you've done your, if you've filled your dim style out correctly, you should be able to just grab the 2 and like pull it back in between the arrows like this, and the arrows stay in. If the arrows are continually popping out or the 2 is popping out, you haven't set up your dim style correctly. So you want to go back to the standards page, look at that, and make sure that it's all done correctly. Otherwise, your arrow size and number size should be correct so that it fits. Now, I think I'm missing one more dimension. I've got overall height, but I don't have this dimension here. Now, this is where you could place the dimension here, and you could place it if my 2 popped out, and I could place a dimension here. Okay, so my question to you is, which one should I keep? It's the exact same dimension. I'm telling the exact same information. Should I keep this one here between the object and the border, or should I keep this one here between the adjacent views? So according to dimension standard, which is the correct one to keep? The one on the left or the one on the right? Any guesses? Left. Okay, why are we keeping the one on the left? Because it's away from the border. It's between 2 adjacent views. And that was like, I don't know, one of these rules up here. Dimensions applied to 2 adjacent views should be placed between the views. So that's what's happening. So the 2 is going to stay here. I'm going to get rid of the one between the object and the border. I want to keep that clear. Also, you want to keep the space between the object and the border clear. That's like this zone here. That's where you would like pencil in notes and changes when you're like meeting with someone and going through this project. So take the 2, I'll grab it, and I'll pop it back between the arrows because it just jumped out for a second. And now I think we're done. Like I've got my overall length with height. I've got my additional dimension details. The last thing is the scale in your title block. This assignment, do you remember what we scaled it to yesterday? If you don't remember, you can just double click, and then the scale value pops up down here. I scaled it to 1 to 3. So you need to make sure that your title block reflects that it says 1:3, 1 to 3. That's the scale value. I don't have a scale function because I only half filled up my title block. So you just make sure that your title block says 1 to 3, and then you move on and you dimension drawing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you go through, and when all 6 are dimensioned, you get rid of any extraneous views, save, and then you can go to export PDF. And when you do so, if you want to export all of them as a package, instead of current layout, you're going to do all layouts. And it'll do all the pages and save it as a nice little PDF bundle. It'll be in the order of the layouts that you have. So you may want to like click and reorder them. So they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Check over your PDF. Make sure it's perfect. So what I mean by that is I'll save this one as a PDF and show you. Export PDF. And I just want current layout. I'll call this dimensioning notes sample. Save. Okay, and we want to open that and look at it. So we'll go to documents. So I called this dimensioning note sample. So what you want to make sure when you're checking your PDF is that your border is even all the way around. It should have this like pretty standard 1/2-inch border all the way. It shouldn't be cut off anywhere. If you have issues with this being like cut off, that's in your page setup manager, you made a mistake. So you'll want to go back and make that change. Make sure that your title block appears. Make sure that all your dimensions appear. There have been, very infrequently this has happened, but sometimes, somehow, the layers get frozen. So in your layers manager, there's over here, there's like this little sunburst. Somehow, sometimes your viewport gets frozen. So these will turn into little like snowflakes. And here too is this viewport. VP freeze, here we go. And sometimes these are turned into snowflakes, and sometimes you can see your object here, but when you go to save it as a PDF, it shows up blank. And that's like because somehow you've accidentally frozen the layer. So if that happens, go look in your layer manager and make sure you haven't frozen a layer. If you're still having issues and it's not like plotting correctly or saving correctly as a PDF, just let me know and then I'll come help you. But essentially when you save it, you should have 6 pages like this. And then you take that one PDF file with 6 pages and you hand that in. And that's going to be your assignment out of 60 marks. And again, it's not going to be a participation mark at this point. It's going to be like an actual assignment mark. I'll be looking through, I'll be marking your border spacing. I'll be checking that your title block was filled in correctly. I'll be checking the objects, making sure that they're placed correctly and you haven't actually made any drawing mistakes. I'll be checking your layers to make sure that your line thickness is correct. Also, when you hand it in, I can see, oh, it's hard to show here. But I can see what layers you've made in your assignment on the PDF. So if I actually open it, I can see that you've made the correct layers. Like I can check all of that stuff. I'll check that you've dimensioned to ANSI standard, that you have your notes. That's the whole point of this assignment is I'm going to be assessing everything that you've done so far, right? All those little mini assignments you had, those are checkpoints to make sure that you've done it correctly. And then now it's like your summative assessment with everything. All right, so are there any questions about this thing? Are there any questions about this, about the 20 dimensioning rules? Are there any questions about this part, the AutoCAD stuff, how to do it, how to get there, how to save it, any of that? And please don't hand in the DWG file. I can't open it. Please make sure you save it as a PDF. All right, questions, comments, concerns? That's it. Get to work.